So is there an argument to be made going the more traditional route that you guys have all done or are doing?
Yes, there is. It is very compartmentalized, I think. Like if you want to work on big features, you have to assist on big features.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to work if that you're an editor in reality and then someone calls you out of the blue and says, hey, you want to assist on a feature? That's not going to happen. You have to network within those groups. There's it's very snobbish, actually,
exactly.
both ways. And you disagree?
Well, I mean, obviously you're right, but there's I think everybody finds their own path. There's no one way to do this.
Yeah.
We gave you very brief summaries of our paths in, and all four of us were different. And if you took 100 people, there'd be 100 different stories.
Right.
But if you, I taught at the AFI for a long time, and all of our students were, we were very proud of the fact that we were teaching people what really happened in real cutting rooms. And they were learning the technology and the techniques, and they did a lot of editing. They worked their asses off. And some of them came out and tried to do independent features. And you come out of film school and you do have some contacts, which are the other students, and some of them are directing. So they may, you're their friend, they may hire you. And some people made it that way. Mm-hmm. And eventually you join the union as an editor, not as an assistant. So that's a path. And yes, you're right, the traditional path is the path I took, and also a good path, which is you hopefully work with people that do the kind of work that you do, that you want to do. So if you want to cut feature films, it's better to not work in reality because you won't meet people who are doing features. Yeah. And you won't hone your skills in that way. But the path upward is this, right? So you take any path you can get to get up there.
And in some cases, like you guys, you went this and then down and went up again, right?
Yeah.
So let's open it to some questions. We have other topics to discuss, but I know, Paul, you had a question.
It was more a comment and I guess a question, which is, isn't it true that many assistants use their credits on, say, big features or whatnot to nab an editing job? On indie film because they just, you say, they don't pay attention to the fact that it's two different jobs. They just see all this long line of incredible films and they go, wow, maybe you'd be good.
Credits are all that matters. Nothing matters but credits. I know editors who had one great movie 25 years ago and they've done schlock since then and they're still getting jobs based on that one credit 25 years ago. And yeah, it's the same thing. People will say, just the way you described it. Look at, you worked on this amazing movie, and there's an assumption that there's a direct line. And of course, I don't mean to belittle the assistant editing position. Of course, you got to learn. But yeah, there's an assumption that okay, this person's ready to move up.
I've been finding for some of the job postings I've been working around that it's a lot of genre specific. If you're going to get hired in reality, they want reality experience. If you have this, they want that kind of experience. So if you talk about that, and then my theory is that documentary is very close to reality. From a strictly editorial viewpoint, would you agree with that?
So the question was whether editing reality is similar to editing documentaries.
Well, I think everybody that hires anybody wants to pigeonhole them, right? Not to say that's good, it's bad, but you want somebody who did exactly this job already.
And not exactly the same system.
And hopefully everything was the same. I do agree with you that reality and docs are similar, having never done a reality show, but it stands to reason.
They're similar, but they're different.
So far, the panel's all been focused on film, and your relationship with your assistant is nowhere close to what a relationship between a reality editor and his assistants are. Their responsibilities are to find, effective stems or things like that, or music cues, and do string outs, which you would consider in your world just your first rough cut of the deal.
String outs, a select role.
Right, a select role. When you're talking about relationships between editors and assistant editors, it all depends on what genre you're in. When you're in reality TV, the relationship is very close. An assistant editor not only is technically savvy, but also be able to do all of that extra work that an editor under those kind of timelines doesn't have the time to do. All the little cleanup work for the audio, all this extra stuff, the prep for the audio house once they're finished. So their
We do all of that
relationship
stuff too.
That's
is
normal.
more-
We just haven't been talking about it because we're just complaining,
Yeah.
but we do all that stuff. And many times that's the highlight of your day. That's the most creative thing you do is.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, find sound cues. I mean, there was a couple of weeks where my first half of my day was daily, second half of my day was looking for music. I spent 4 or 5 hours a day looking for music. And the director came in and he just was not happy with the cues that the music editor was bringing in. So it was like, Pete, where's that list of music cues you had? And we dug up some good stuff out of there. So that was very satisfying. That was a creative contribution I made. So there are opportunities like that. We do that stuff
There's
too.
opportunities, but in terms of the opportunity for you as an assist to move into his show, it's far less than if you were in a reality television show.
That's what I understand.
Or
Yes.
TV show. The movement is quicker because you're doing most of that work in the first place once you work your way up through the
Karsten
Disagree.
disagrees.
It comes
I don't
down
agree
to
with
more
that.
jobs. I think there's just way more reality out
Yeah,
there, and if
exactly.
you're willing to work for little money at night, then you will get an editing gig in reality. That's just more jobs. That's
Well, it's
why.
certainly true that there's a huge amount of reality
Yes.
out there, and I think there must be a certain level of burnout as well. But I know people do move up much faster in
Yeah, they
reality.
do.
Well, they
right?
move up much faster simply because they're doing that job, more aspects of that job. They may start off simply as, you say, digitizers, people that sort bins and stuff like that. But as that proficiency level goes, and this is within the shows that I work on the Bachelor series. The assistant editors move up from one grade to the next till finally they're actually giving them a junior editor status, where they're doing far more than an assistant would, just a little bit less.
But don't you have enormous staffs, don't you? I mean, just enormous. How many editors do you have on your show?
There's the key too, is we do have a staff and we have staff turnover, so you're gonna
Right,
have
so
to get people.
a dozen editors,
Yes.
Right.
dozens of assistants. This is 2-3 people.
Yeah,
You know, I mean,
Absolutely.
it's.
I think we're
What I'm
comparing
saying is
apples and
that
oranges
if
here a
you're-
little
If you're
bit.
looking to find your way into editing, you'll probably find it faster in that realm than.
That's
you
what
will-
I said.
See, I even saw a
Because it's
reality
not such a
posting
shutdown.
today
Good
for
point.
an assistant.
Well, because
And one of the
there's
assistant duties
so
was
many
to
more-
cut promos, and I thought, they're calling it assistant, but they're asking for an editor.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
All right,
you get a lot of
Karsten?
The
that.
problem is then that once you are a reality editor, because you get pigeonholed again, it's really difficult. You won't get that call for the feature film unless
That's not true. That's not true. I've known.
Well,
you can probably name like 2 or 3 people that might be right, but they're like in the.
I can name the executive producer of The Bachelor who started off as the editor.
Yes, but you've just
He's
proved
a
his
bachelor.
point.
But he's
Yes, he's not
moved
a,
up through the industry to wherever he wanted to go.
but not to the editor's
That's one
role.
of like, 12, 20, 30 editors that went down on.
He could have
And
gone
he's
into
pretty
film
good,
cutting
so-
if he wanted to, because the company that owns that company also is the parent company for
I
other
think we've kind of covered this point. So there's a lot of other questions that are coming up. So let's move along. There's somebody from the overflow room who wants to know of our panelists, how important is it to be in the union to land an opportunity in features or television editing?
Very important.
You have to.
It depends on the kind of work you want to do. It depends on the type of material you want to work on. Our union only covers features, not narrative features. Doesn't cover documentaries, at least on the West Coast. If that's
It does on the East Coast for sure.
It does on the East Coast, not on the West Coast. It doesn't cover commercials. It doesn't cover news. It doesn't cover videos. It covers sitcoms, hour TV shows. That's about it. So if that's the stuff, if you want to work on narrative, studio stuff, yes, you should try to get yourself into the union. If you want to
Well,
work
at the end of the day, you will have to.
Yes.
Whether you start there is another question. And I think almost everybody starts non-union, and they slowly somehow realize they have to be in the union to do the kind of work they want to do, and then they join the union.
And that, Karsten, that was your story, basically.
Yes, like Steve said, there are many ways to get to Rome in that way. You could also start as a post-PA on television or features that are union. You might PA for 3-4 years, and then if you're liked and someone pulls some strings, they can get you in as an apprentice or an assistant if you paid attention and made some friends. But there are multiple ways to do that. But in the beginning, you need 100 days non-union work
Right.
to join. That's what you need.
And that's the most common way to get into
That's
the
the
union.
way.
Yeah,
Reality is a wonderful
I mean,
place for that.
This is a structural flaw, but it's good for outsiders in the way the union works. The union says if you do our kind of work, non-union, for 100 days, you can get in. So that keeps the non-union world alive.
That's an interesting point.
And you know, it's the result of court decisions. I mean, it's not accidental that of people on the outside who wanted to get in and couldn't because it was a totally closed, walled-in environment. We're also talking about the personal relationships of the editing room, right? Like, how do you deal with the editor? How do you deal with the producers? Being successful as an editor is half skill and half people management. And you have to be good at both, and some of it is this desire you have to succeed and you're not getting there, and you can't let people see that. I don't know, maybe you want to focus it more, I don't know exactly where you're going.
Right, I mean, let's talk about this, kind of the psychology of the editing room. I mean, you obviously have something to say.
Yeah, I got a lot of jobs by being like the court jester of the cutting room on my first couple of jobs. You know, when you're an apprentice editor, if you can be witty and you're a good conversationalist and you can keep people entertained. I mean, when you're reconstituting dailies, that's monkey work. I mean, anyone can do it. You know, everyone had a college degree. You know, it really is about personal relationships. You know, that's when you do get that first editing gig. That's how you're going to get it. Probably because someone enjoyed sitting next to you and you didn't drive them crazy. You know, and so. Yeah, it's very important to have. The cutting rooms are so small now. At least I'm just speaking about the world I know, which is features and long form TV. It's more often than not director, editor, assistant. You know, you're sitting there in one or two rooms all day. You go out to lunch together. You have to be able to. You can't be shy. You have to be able to have a conversation, to be personable, to make yourself liked, and to contribute.
I once interviewed Gary Marshall and asked him, you know, what do you look for in an editor? And his response was somebody who likes the same kind of food I do. And he was joking, but he was also, this is a person I'm going to spend so many hours with.
You want to be able, you have to have a great personality. And you hire somebody because you want to actually spend 12 hours of your day with that person. If it's somebody you don't want to spend that hours with, you won't get hired. Yeah. So it's how you approach the person, it's your personality. We always want to see a smiling face. I don't care about your family problems. I don't bring them into the editing room. We don't want to know about all of that. You've got to keep that all as part of your another life. You come into that editing room with a fresh attitude, a smile on your face, a willingness to do everything. You're there to please your editor. And it's a whole attitude and a major personality. And that's what's going to get you the job and keep you the job. And of course, being able to do what you're supposed to do, the skills, the technical skills that you have. But, you know, we don't like crybabies, we don't like depressed people. I don't want to walk in there and see the back of your head. I want to see a smiling face and say, yes, certainly we'll do it as soon as we can. There's a willingness, there's a jumping up on your feet, there's an activity, there's a positivity about you that is fun to be with. And that's the kind of person and the personalities we look for. And, you know, if somebody's shy, then you just got to bring them up a little and, you know, just be at the level where you're not too quiet and it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. We want to hear you speak and articulate what the problems are. So there's a whole etiquette about how to behave and the personality and how you conduct yourself in an editing room and with your editor.
Well, I would just add, because it sort of sounds like you have to, I mean, I agree with that, but from the assistant's perspective, it's like, well, geez, I got to fake it all day. I got to do this. and so you could look at it another way, which is if you feel like you're faking it all day, you're working with the wrong people. I mean, you want to be, you know, and this is true for editors and directors as well. You want to work with somebody that you actually like, that you don't have to fake it. And you know, I think I've been fairly lucky in my life to have worked with directors that I like. And if you work, you know, and the couple of times I've worked with people that I really didn't respect, it didn't work out, and it didn't work out for me or for them. So the same is true for assistants and editors. You have to get a kick out of that person on some level, or it's like pulling teeth.
You'll be miserable.
Yeah. Right.
You'll be miserable.
Karsten, have you had those experiences? You're nodding your head too.
Absolutely, it's absolutely that way. I worked with Laura Jane Coleman the last year on Make It a Break in COVID Affairs, and we do bring personal stuff in the editing room, but off hours. You know, you come in and you chat a little bit, and then you dive in, and every time you walk in the room, you do smile because you like seeing the other person. Sometimes it gets crazy, then the smiles go a little bit muted, and you try to keep the head low and go through the storm. But you bond over that too. It's not like there's no, like, you know, you're not trying to be mean to other people. You're being nice and you
professional.
know, yeah, and you
Do
come
your
out
job.
alive and
Well,
right.
well. Yeah.
It's what we do is collaborative, right? So
Yeah.
we all have to find a way to work together. So that's pretty primary. You know, it's however many people are in this environment, and we have to somehow or other get along.
The last word you said was environment. Now that you can practically run Media Composer on an iPad, do you think the future of the editor, the director, and the assistant being in one room is going to stay for a while, or do you think that the writing really is on the wall?
I think it's going to depend on the scale of the project. If the project is big enough, then that will be up to the director, and I imagine most directors would like to have a physical room to go to be able to get away from it all. If it's a small project or a no-budget project, then that's a viable alternative for the future, sure.
I think there will be more separation, but I don't think it will be primary. I think there will be days where, particularly, you know, if the cutting room is very distant from my house or something like that, I might take a day where I don't come in and where I work from home. And I think that'll happen more as bandwidth gets higher. But I think at the end of the day, the director-editor relationship is sort of sacred in a certain way, and it happens in a room. You know, and there will be exceptions. There will be directors who will phone in all their notes, but I don't. Not in the near future, anyway.
I agree too. There will be more. There's more mobility. Like you can't just. The last Twilight movie was mostly assembled in the back of a van towards the set. It was in the Editor's Guild magazine. Like that was interesting. And we can access computers remotely now as an assistant. Oh, I forgot to do an output. Logging in and doing an output. That's possible now, technology. Or an editor working at home on a home station on the weekend or even during the week because the drive to Santa Monica is too far. That's possible too. But I agree that eventually when it goes down to the creative decisions, you want to finish something,
Wanna be
gotta
with
be
somebody.
together and it's not going to change.
I think that's a good thing. I mean, it's a testament to our shared humanity that we need to be in the same room with each other and look each other in the eyes. That the internet doesn't do that.
Let me just say one other thing. There's a lot of other businesses, a lot of other fields of human endeavor that would lend themselves to that sort of thing a lot more easily than the cutting room, and they haven't done that. There's still an advantage to going in there, meeting a client face to face. So if they're still doing it, where we're just sitting in front of a computer and you could literally do it anywhere, there's a good chance that we'll continue to do it as well.
Yes, question here.
Back to the issue of the guild and the union, and I'm thinking more in terms of television. Does being a union member in any way help you sort of find work? I mean, it's not like it was 20
No.
or 30 years ago. So
It wasn't true then either.
Really?
Well, it wasn't, but a long time ago, weren't you sort of, or maybe it's more in a camera situation where you do this job for a while and then you're on the union roster and then they hire the union members first. And
Well, that's true now too. But the union was never a hiring hall.
Right.
Yeah.
And it isn't now either.
There is an availability list, and I've gotten calls once or twice off of that. But it's basically a joke. It's interesting though. I will say that this is not the case for all of the Hollywood unions. I have a lot of friends who are in electric and grip, and their unions are hiring halls. They do get hall calls. Their unions do get them jobs, but their unions are much more closed, much more difficult to get into, and so frankly, they have a better ratio of available jobs to available individuals than we do. Our industry, post-production, has gotten a little skewed in that department, I think, unfortunately, and the economy has a lot to do with that. But no, our union does not find us work.
How do you all mainly get your work through relationships?
For assistant editors, there's no other way. Editors have agents. That helps. But
Do they help?
Well, they help in a way, but they don't solve your problem.
No.
I mean, if you don't have relationships with directors, you're not gonna. At the top of the heap, where every credit you have blows people's minds, yes, the agent helps. But for somebody like myself, and I love my agents, this isn't a criticism at all, I have to bring something to the party, and I have to have my clients, which are my directors.
Right. Okay. Yes, question right here.
Yeah, my question is, a couple weeks ago I was in Local 683 and we got brought into the Editors Guild.
Oh, yeah.
And I was really excited to hear that, and I've really, it's blown my whole world open as far as like new opportunities, like the training and everything like that. What would be your advice for somebody who's like in the guild and really just going for their first job, would it be like an unpaid internship or some kind of like post PA, or I really don't even know where I should be focusing my efforts that way.
How do you get your first job?
That's a good question. How do you
And
get
he's
your
in
first?
the union, so
Yes.
So
This
I
is-
still go non-union. I don't know.
How much money do you have saved up?
Yeah, right. It's like you got to work for free to get the experience, because if you don't have experience and skills, nobody's going to hire you. So the first thing you got to learn is the skills. You got to learn how to operate the Avid system. You got to know Final Cut, and you got to know all the technology. Go and do a course. Go to the Avid schools and go and learn, and learn everything first. At least get the skills under your belt. And once you know that, then you can go in and hire yourself for nothing in a union situation and just go and work. I don't know if they allow you to work for nothing in a union situation.
not
No.
doing anything that's worth doing.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
then just get a non-union job to start off with, just to get the experience and learn the work, and then you can get a union job. But you've got to learn your basic skills, and you've got to learn the technology.
Well, another thing is the ACE internship program,
Yeah.
which you've obviously made great
Yeah.
use of, largely because you meet important editors.
And their assistants.
And their assistants, right. And I think
Right.
a lot of people who've come through that have
Yeah.
landed in cutting rooms.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you want to make friends with editors. And I've said this to many groups, and people rarely do this, but if you're somebody who wants to break into the business, you can do a lot worse than cold writing to the editors you respect.
Really?
But it's not a letter that says, I'm young and I'm green and I'll do whatever you want and I'm a good guy. It's, I've seen every movie you've ever edited, and here's
love
why
what
I
you do.
think they're great, and I followed your career, and this is why I'd like to work for you. And I think editors are very rarely get letters like that.
You can use ACE. Like ACE, if you write a letter and you go to ACE, and Jenny McCormick was lovely, she will pass that on. And people are busy; they sometimes just don't have the time. But
Right.
Yeah,
This,
you've got to
this, is,
start
this is a
somewhere.
great advantage of modern
Right.
technology. Because I know I wrote to, this is a long time ago, but I wrote to Haskell Wexler. And I met him. I chatted with him in his den. He didn't know me from Adam.
That's
I
nice.
met several people that way. I didn't really know how to make
Break in.
good out of it. I didn't turn it into anything. But I had some great first meetings.
Yeah, it just helps to be able to have that. It takes a lot of courage to do that.
Sure.
It's a good skill to learn.
That leads us to the question that's being asked in the overflow room, which is, what is your preference, Avid or Final Cut Pro?
Oh, we always get.
You
Always
always
get asked that.
Oh, they're asking.
We should say that we are very happy the overflow room is there, and we're thinking of you every minute.
Yes, exactly.
My answer is yes.
Okay.
The
So,
answer is yes.
You got to know both. As an assistant and as an editor right now, to be competitive in a modern
You have to.
environment, you got to do both. I've done both.
And
Yeah.
a lot of companies are using
Yes.
Final Cut, so.
So,
Yeah.
What do you prefer, Carsten?
preferring assistant, I prefer Avid by a mile. Not to say that it doesn't happen, that you can do it. Fincher proves it, Cohen proves it, Eureka, Glee is on Final Cut. They figured out a system, they know how to handle it, and it works. I still prefer, from how my workflow is with locators and locator lists and all of that, I prefer my Avid. But for an editing machine, for a smaller project, for my stuff, I love Final Cut too.
I also love
it has some
Final
great
Cut.
stuff, yeah.
For small
You have to know both. I think we
You have to
all
know
here know
both.
both of them.
Yeah. No, you do.
I've done 98% of my paid work on the Avid. Actually, the first time I got a Final Cut job, I really didn't know Final Cut, but I took the job anyway. I just taught myself over the weekend. I think there's a sense that Steve and I share that Avid is an industrial machine that it's used at the highest level, with some exceptions. If you want to be serious about this business, you have to learn the Avid.
Yeah. Yeah.
well, I think that's the practical answer to the question, as opposed to what do we prefer, and I prefer Avid. But if you are just in terms of numbers, at the top of the feature and television world, Avid is much more dominant. So in that sense, if you want to get to that level, you're going to have to know Media Composer somehow.
Well, and Avid offers the ability, with the Avid, the storage systems to hold on to and manage a lot more media if you're in a TV series, for example, and you need to keep everything online or nearline. I know TV shows that have run into some problems with that if they're Mac-based.
Yeah, I just prefer...
Final Cut Pro-based, rather, yeah.
The way it feels to me, having worked on the Avid first and got the Final Cut later, and I strongly prefer the Avid, is it feels like all the intuitive ways that you would do this if you were starting from scratch are sort of the way the Avid does it. And Final Cut wanted to do it like that, but everything was copyrighted, so they had to make it a little bit different. They had to tweak this in an irritating little way that I find counterintuitive. I'm sure that a lot of that is because of my initial bias and where I came from.
Where you started from, yeah.
But that's the way it feels to me.
Okay.
Yeah, the Final Cut people obviously
have their bias.
have a 180-degree difference of
Well, I
opinion.
started on Avid and I went to Final Cut, and my skill level just went to here on the Final Cut because I found it intuitive. So
Yeah.
it's just different tools.
It's different,
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
Yes,
What I
another
wanted to
question?
ask, is there kind of a division between network television and cable television, both in terms of maybe media system, although I'm really more
What does
interested in
cable
the
television
union.
mean to you?
Huh?
What does cable television mean to you? You mean like
HBO's Showtime,
Showtime series,
A&E,
HBO
Bravo,
series?
all those sorts of things, as opposed to ABC, NBC, CBS. And I'm thinking more in terms of, my real question is more about the union. Is more of that non-union and more of network television union? Is there that kind of?
That stuff's all union. All the major cable net, all the so-called premier cable, the cable networks you pay extra for, HBO, Showtime, that's all unionized. Most of the basic cable high-profile shows, your AMC, your FX shows, that's all unionized.
Is it Final Cut versus Avid? That was your other part of your question, right?
Yeah, but it's more of a joke.
Well, but some of the Showtime was all Final Cut for a while.
Yeah.
And then they backed away from it,
Did they go back to Avid?
as far as I know.
I think they lifted their ban on Avid, is what happened.
And there are HBO shows that are Final Cut too. I mean, so I don't think it's universal, but I still think at the top of the world, including cable, there's more Avid than there is Final Cut. Whether it's certainly not universal at all, which is good. It's good for everybody that it's not one or the other.
Let's go to a final statement. Maybe you can all say something about the future of editing.
Now it's so good.
Well, okay.
Can't tell you.
I mean, these aren't reality people, but we know all the arguments over the new role of the predator and the like. So obviously, we've seen a decade of a huge amount of change in the edit room. What does the next decade hold? Is there going to be the same level of changes, or is it leveled out? What do you think?
I don't
James?
know, Steve. What do you think? I think it depends on the technology. They keep saying everything's getting smaller and shrinking, and the computer's going to be this size. So I don't know where it's going to go from here, but I think basically the skills are going to remain. The art of editing is going to remain. That will never change. No matter what you do or don't do, the art of editing will always be there.
I'm going to plug your book for a second.
Okay, good.
But there are two very recently published books sitting up here.
Exactly.
And they're both very relevant to this conversation. So they have you and Laurie
Let me get
Coleman
a copy of it.
have a wonderful book
It's in the
for
office.
assistants.
Yeah, maybe it's
That
downstairs.
I was rather skeptical about this book, but I was able to look at quite a bit of it on Amazon,
Send you a
and
copy,
I
Steve.
lost my skepticism because it's so based in the reality of the editing room and in the ACE internship program. And so it looks to be an unusual book because
Yeah, it
most
is.
books for assistants really aren't any good. And I have a book for those of you who want to get good with the Avid. And we're going to give away several of these in the raffle, but I would encourage you guys to take a look at this. It's on Amazon, and obviously I'm biased, but I think it's a good book.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
our book is called Make the Cut. And it's
Make
also
the Cut.
available on Amazon.
I think it's great too.
It's a great book. It'll
Living
give
proof
you-
that it works if you read it.
Yeah.
But where are we going in the future? I think we were talking about this earlier. I think the pool of jobs is shrinking, and I think everybody in this room is going to have to deal with that. And that's going to keep happening for a while, and we're eventually going to get to a size that is okay again. And there's going to be a shakeout. This is what you were saying.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a shakeout, and those with the determination and the fortitude and the perseverance are going to survive and get to the other side of it, and others will go into other lines of work. What the editing room of the future looks like, you know, I couldn't even guess. But there's no cinema without editing, right? I mean,
Right.
cinema without editing is planting a camera and it's
Letting the camera
nothing.
roll.
You know, editing enables cinema, so we're not going to stop editing.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the panelists for coming and sharing their knowledge.